Since we're live. Fantastic. Hello, world. How's the sound? Do let me know because I'm by myself tonight, which means I couldn't test it. So, hello and welcome to another action packed stream that's not been properly planned or thought about at all. That camera position's not great, is it? Let's just adjust that slightly. There we go. There we see. Fully prepped as usual, as you can see. In fact, I really didn't think enough about tonight at all. The first message is slightly concerning in terms of sound test. So hello Ronnie, hello Fuke as well. I know you're waiting there. Sound is good. Thank you very much. Right. So yes, we're live for a world building session. I am, as you can see, on my own tonight. Jason has gone off to a family beer festival. I think I'm missing out somehow. So I've got beer by myself, which I had delivered to the house in a display of opulence and extravagance because, frankly, I want beer too. And I have more. So, let's do some world building. I discovered a tool earlier tonight. I have been looking for a new. I want to map a city that one of my settings that I use features this city called Bahrain Archipelago City, which is a city of 1,000 islands. And I have always wanted to map this city. So every now and then I do a Google search for tools to help drawing 1,000 islands and mapping it all politically and all that kind of stuff. Well, the tool I found tonight isn't going to help me do 1,000 islands in the way that I want, but it is really cool and useful and a really good tool. And you never know, if I stitch enough together, maybe I could do those 1,000 islands, but it's not really its design purpose. So this is called, what is it called? That's a really good question. I'm not terribly sure. Let me put it up on screen. So I'm just going to reload the page. So there we go. Fantasy map generator from Azgaar. Azgaar's fantasy map generator. I'll give you the URL. I should put that in the link, shouldn't I? Hang on. I should add it to the video description. For the moment, I will chuck it in chat. And I'm going to go through some of this tool, see what it can do. I've had a little play with it, but we'll discover some more of it together. Because when I do world building, I generally like to start with the map. Now, normally I like to kind of draw the map myself, and so I can place things, and as I place things I get ideas and stuff. But as a starting point for something that generates a half-decent map, I think this is a great tool. And it certainly warrants some investigation for you GMs out there that are looking to generate a world map. For me, the map is always pretty much the starting point, but it's as I'm placing things, I'm thinking about the history and the government types and so on. So let's start by creating a brand new map. So the interface here, it's a little confusing at first. So I have had a little play with it. And the tab we want to go to here is the options. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to increase the interface size, which is this slider bar here, so you have a better chance of seeing it. And I'm going to reduce the transparency down so that you get a better view of what's going on here. In fact, what I might do, yes, give me a moment. I'm going to, if I can do this whilst live, I'll come back. I'm going to try and do, preview edit, yeah, I can do this. I'm going to make it so I can zoom in on that corner. So, screen capture, monitor number 1. Oh yeah, technology, no stopping me. Right, da-da-da, and da. Let's give me a moment. As you see, I'm well prepared for this. So let's push that view God damn it, you're right, there's no sound when I'm on that view. Okay, you should be able to hear me now. Okay, so, with the few viewers that are left, okay, yeah, there we go. Close really can't hear you either. Yeah. Oh, pay attention to the chat, Becky. Right. Now it's because I'll explain how that happened. There were some nuggets of comedy in that as well. Basically, Jason went away and he left things plugged into the sound box and ended up setting the sound up differently in XSplit to how we normally do it. And it's absolutely fine and would be no problem right up until I decided to make a new scene whilst live and forgot that had to do a special thing with the sound. So, anyway, let me take you through what I did that you couldn't hear. So, what I've done is I've set my temperature on the equator to max, and on the poles I've put it on minimum. Then, if I just bring this down so you can see it. So, here we've got our segment of the world that we will be having a map of, and we can position that, you know, on the somewhere in the tropics, on the equator, whatever. On this occasion, I think we should just go for as much of the world as possible. So I'm going to set that there. And then we've got precipitation. I'm going to set that to max. And then for the wind, I've decided to basically make Saturn. And I imagine the wind's going to have an impact on erosion, therefore mountains and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, there's our world configured. And then we've got a number of things we can edit. So we can change the size of the map. We could make it absolutely massive. This is in pixels. So this is standard HD 720 resolution, which is what I'm broadcasting at. So that's, I guess, as good a size as any for this one. Now, map seed. This is just a random number, and you can generate different numbers. And, oh, it's giving me my history for some reason. Okay. I can type in extra things, can I? Yeah, I can. So basically, map seeds is to do with random numbers on computers. And the long and the short of it is, there's no real random number on a computer, but you can kind of fake one by having a map seed. And if you have a different map seed, you get a different set of numbers. And if you specify the same seed and do the same random number generation in the same order, you will get the same result. So it's a handy way of maybe making a map, but not actually saving it anywhere, just making it the number, and you can recreate it if you follow the same steps. So that's what the map seed is. Now, I haven't figured out what this one is yet. Points number. I'm going to at a guess, I'd say this is going to be a low detail world. This will be some kind of smarty blartfast version of the world. And then we've got this template here where we can choose from different kind of, you know, types of map generation. So why don't we try making an atoll? We can choose number of cultures and number of states. Now I thought that was interesting, separating the cultures from the states. So here we can genuinely get a number of different societies in our world at once. And, you know, well, cultures, it kind of has an implication of history there as well. And this is the kind of thing, I mean, to be honest, I think a lot of people generally just think in terms of countries when they make maps. And I think having this differentiator of cultures and states being, you know, a collective government of some kind, that's really interesting. But I think these numbers are probably backwards. So let's bring the number of cultures down to, let's say, 4, and the number of countries, let's have that much higher. Let's have, I don't know, 54 countries. Now, size variety is the difference in size of the countries. So if we have 0, they're going to be quite similar. If we go up to 10, they're going to vary quite massively. So if we've got a large number of countries, then let's make it even more then. No, let's min-max. I've not figured out what growth rate does yet. Towns number, fairly obvious. You know, you can put 1,000 odd towns in, or 11, or you can set it to automatic that I'm going to do here. In fact, no, I'm going to keep the number quite low with good reason because I don't want this to slow up too much during this stream. So now I've got all of this stuff set. I could save this as a preset, I guess, or I can just hit new map and let it generate something. Now that does take a moment to generate, but it's finished. So let's go back and take a look at what it's done. Here is our atoll. In fact, if I go to, which button? This button, there we go, we can see the whole thing now. So here is our atoll, and it's created all of these cultures and states and lots of atoll-y type things. And the interesting thing is we can zoom in, and we can zoom right in, and you see we've got different things showing on the map. We've got some rivers, we've got some trade roads and trade routes by ship. We can see some cities, which seem to have generated around here, mostly on the coast and along the rivers, so in that sense it's quite realistic. Now, there's more things this can do. This isn't the extent of the map. So, let's go and have a look at this little town here called Lugripivo. And I'm going to click on this town, and that should bring up a little dialogue here, and there's various things this can do. We can move the town, get rid of it, and so on. But what I thought was quite interesting was that this map icon here, and if we click that, it takes us to a totally different website where the town has a visual representation. This is one that people may have seen before. It's been around quite a long time now. So we've got the town of Lugripivo, and we've got different sectors. We've got Old Lugripivo, we've got the market somewhere. Yeah, there's the market, there's the woods apparently. We've got an area called Low Crown, so the different districts have names, which is quite cool, and we can see where there's farms and stuff. Now, let's come out of, oh, that's out of full screen, whoops. Let's close that tab down, go back into full screen, there we go. Now, I did have a quick look at coastal ones, and it does seem to put the coast in, but it doesn't always seem to get the orientation correct. So, not the end of the world. You just have to kind of mentally twist it. I haven't yet checked if the roads are good. So here we've got a road on the north and southwest. If we go back to the map, there really should... Well, in terms of the major roads, I suppose just west, you could maybe argue that one of the other roads here is maybe going off to a village, you know, past the greenhouse. Yeah, so that's pretty cool, right? But there's more this thing can do. As we let's zoom out of the atoll a little bit and have a look. Let's have a look at the from a zoomed out perspective first. If we go over to style, there are different layers here of things that can be shown. So at the moment we're showing rivers, states, national borders. We're showing the routes. We've got labels, icons, the scale bar in the bottom right there, and we've got markers, whatever they are. Don't seem to spot any. Let's zoom in and see what that does. Nothing noticeable. Okay, so let's add texture. And, well, we can see a little bit of texturing over here. This is a bit like the terrain view on Google Maps, but maybe a bit more blurry. Let's try generating a map with some more mountains and see what comes up. So, let me quickly also catch up with the chat. So, Ronnie says, I would assume growth rate would give a living world a sense of how towns and populations grow per annum. Maybe it just means how many iterations of whatever mathematics it uses to grow the place, and places rise and fall. I'm not sure what's going on behind the scenes to generate that stuff. So maybe it'll be documented somewhere. But then N20 says, lots of atoll-y type things. Indeed, Fugue says, makes sense to me because Canada is multicultural, but Quebec is monoculture, so differences between cultures make sense. Yeah, cultures and national borders don't necessarily line up. So we can have a look at stuff like that in a minute, but first I need to generate a slightly different map to see if this terrain view looks different. So, going back to our interface view here, let's create a continental map of some kind. I'll just leave the other details as they were for now and generate a new map, and it grinds away in the background. It doesn't really have a status indicator while that's happening, which is a little bit annoying. So here we go, we've got a map with 2 large continents and a big sea route in the middle. This is actually quite an interesting map. Cool. All right, so let's have a look at... Oh, let me zoom out to show you the whole thing. Okay, so let's have a little look. So yeah, this is what Terrain's done. It's added this kind of texture here. Now, there is a height map on this thing as well. So if let me turn off everything else, and we'll go through them one by one. So yeah, the height map is showing obviously areas of high altitude, and it kind of overshadows the texture a bit. So all right, there's some hills. Let's see if the texture lines up. It not really, but sort of. I'd say it's more of a generic texture. Okay, so the biomes is showing different kinds of terrain. Now this is where it ties into what we were doing earlier in terms of being on the equator and stuff. Now I did see a key for this earlier. Where was it? Tools, biomes. So here we go, we've got a kind of a key. If I move this down out the way, I'm going to hover over savanna. So this area is savanna. We've got some grassland, some tropical seasonal forest, some temperate deciduous forest, some temperate rainforest, a little band of hot desert, and tropical rainforest. So we could probably go back and, you know, edit this by doing the world settings again. But I wonder, there appears to be some tools here. Percentages. What does this do? Oh, okay, that's just showing this in terms of how much of the world is one or the other. Okay. Oh, there's a paintbrush. Brush radius. I don't know. Ah. So I'm going to brush down some grassland. Aha! Interesting. And some rainforest. Boom. Lots of rainforest. There we go. Okay, that. And what's this? This is a regenerate relief icons. Ah, right. That makes some sense to me, but I haven't explained it to you yet. So that's just regenerated, and that's turned on the relief icons. So relief icons are one of the style options, and if we zoom right in, we can see that, you know, we get, well, here is apparently a forest in a marsh, or something, or grassland. Oh, that must be grassland there. And hills and so on, and big mountain range in the middle. If we turn that off and go back to the height map, taking off biomes, you see it there with the mountains, and you can add relief icons to that. Zoomed in this close, it doesn't look that great actually, but I've been finding the relief icons they kind of look pretty good when you got a lot of the other stuff on. So cells is some kind of regional thing that I think is part of the maths in the background, and grid is ye old traditional hex map, because it should be a hex map. And there's a coordinates thing as well. Right, coordinates gives big gritty things. Oh look, there's longitude and latitude numbers on the edge of the map. There we go. So 0 degrees north, there's our equator. Right. Anyway, turn that one off. Compass rose is, of course, the obligatory map rose in the corner. And we can turn our rivers on and have a look at some of those. So that's pretty good. We'll add the relief back in. Let's have a look at the cultures map. But leave the come on, catch up. This can be a little slow, this map. Let's turn off the height map so it doesn't confuse us, and that's why the relief can be quite handy. So now we can see how our cultures are mapping across the world, and they kind of make some sense to a degree. Although you've got to imagine that I'm thinking this is fairly uninhabited, this land in it. Oh, imagine there are rivers. Do the cultures follow the rivers? Let's have a little look. Yeah, I'm not so sure it's done a good job here, because I would expect that river to be, essentially the river area to be a monoculture. But then again, it is crossing temperate regions, so maybe not. Empires tend to expand east-west, so like this one up here, because this little world-building tip, which I'm sure some of you already know, but empires tend to expand along in a climate that's consistent. So, a European empire will expand across temperate regions, an African empire will expand across savanna, and so on. And that's because the technology and culture of an empire is usually consistent within the empire. So, culture and technology that works in one climate isn't necessarily going to do so well in the next. Whilst we're here, let's have a little catch up on the chat. I think we already covered that one. So N20 says, really nice map. Something about maps that can really spark the imagination. It's true. It's why for me maps are always a start point. And I just love this this particular one here that's generated this island in the middle that has these two competing cultures on. We'll have a look at the countries in a minute and see how that's looking. But maybe we can tweak that if it's not to our liking. So, oh, hang on, I think there's more chat. So, Ronnie says, I'm considering buying Campaign Cartographer as I would like to do proper publishing of scenarios complete with floor plans and maps. Well, I've learnt a little bit about scenarios lately in terms of publishing them professionally, because Jason was writing got a commission to write for a minor publisher. Even though it was a commissioned piece, they decided not to publish it. They didn't like it for a number of reasons. So he sent it to a major publisher instead, and they loved it and have commissioned him for something else. So win some, lose some. The way publishing works with RPGs, you don't necessarily, as a writer, you don't necessarily have to find and source all of the art unless you're going to self-publish. The publisher will source the art separately. Rates of pay vary wildly in the RPG industry. Your entry level will probably be somewhere in the region of 3 cents a word, and that's where you'll probably start. Some of the highest rate of pay I've seen is 12 cents a word, but that was a one-off. I think the majority of it will be in that kind of somewhere in the 3 to 5 cents a word region. And then, of course, it's down to word count. Different publishers want different lengths of word count in their scenarios. And there's usually style guides and things that you have to be consistent to for the publisher. So I would suggest contacting publishers for the style guide before typing it out, rather than writing something and submitting it. Get the style guide, because you don't want to write a good scenario and then they go, yeah, but your style is so inconsistent, please redo it all, because you've used 2 spaces after full stops, as is proper English, but our style guide is 1. Or you've written you've written your scenario in British English, which is of course correctly spelled, but we publish everything in American English, which of course isn't. So get the style guide first, and these people are often very approachable when you're in that world. So just go to it. Just hit them up with an email, ask them for style guides, and see what kind of things they want. And you never know. Give it a try. So Russell Higgins, hello. Yes, your weekly dose of me. I'm afraid you've got to wait another week for Jason. But you get me as ever, because I don't let people down, do I, Jason? He's not here. He's at a beer festival. That's why I have had beer delivered to the house. Because sod it. Right. Yeah, I mean, I've not used Campaign Cartographer, but I did meet Ralph, who's a member of their team, and he was showing me around some of what the software could do. And the thing that was interesting about Campaign Cartographer is they came from a very CAD background. So the software, it has a lot of power and functionality, and it has that kind of application software interface. But of course, behind that is a ton of power in terms of what it can achieve. And it certainly seems to have a lot of icon sets and, iconography. So yeah, it looks like a very, very powerful piece of software. The speed Ralph was able to do things with it. Of course, he works for the company. But we picked him up as a sponsor for Com+2, so you never know, you might even win a copy. N20 Games says, I always suggest people write a synopsis for any project and use that to intrigue publishers. If they like it, they can hire you and then flesh it out and develop it. Well, yeah, I mean, you could talk to the publisher in terms about what your scenario is and stuff. I think that's a natural conversation that follows from asking for style guides. But, whichever way round you do it, I mean, if you're going to write on commission or write something for a publisher, then yeah, you're gonna agree that first, right? You're not gonna just write something and hope they love it. Or maybe they will. But yeah, I definitely say talk to and speak to the publisher beforehand. They'll always they'll give you their style guide because they ought to. Because it's free information and it's really useful for authors to know that, and you could ask for that just out of curiosity, or just because I want to do it and I want to get good at doing it, can give me your style guide so that I can do some practicing, whatever, but yeah, if you're going to actually get them to publish a piece, it's probably as well to discuss it before writing it. But if you just want to write and get good at writing it, then just get the style guide and then worry about synopsises and stuff later. Because the thing is, it's a lot of us, a lot of creative people, we tend to be very good at starting projects. And the best thing you ever make is always the next thing you make. Because we always, when we get to the end of our projects, we tend to either rush them or start the next thing because we've had this great idea. And it's always the last stretch of the project. Finishing a project is really hard, and it's a skill in its own right. So, as a creative, it can be very difficult to finish things. And my advice is, whatever it is you're working on, finish it, because you need to get good at finishing. It's not enough to, your next idea might be better, but until you get good at finishing, it's never going to be good. And that's the thing, you have to get good at finishing projects, because you might be the world's best project starter, but if you can't finish it, it's not going to be any good. So yeah, just get writing. At least Jason's got a good excuse for not being here, I suppose. He is visiting Mum 2 and Dad 3 as part of this beer festival thing. Russell says, there is something to be said for hand-drawn maps and materials. There is. And yes, stylistically, yes, but that's not within reach of all of us. I am really good at doing things with a computer. I am not great at drawing. I do cartoons. At best, they are out of proportion. I doodle in meetings and on the phone and stuff. That's the limit of my art capacity. But even if you can draw, I think tools like this can serve as inspiration. And I don't necessarily know if I would have considered separation of culture and country before looking at this tool. Because I tend to think of cultures as being a single city. And because the way I tend to build my worlds, I tend to think of sort of republic, city-states type things rather than empires and so on. So that was a really interesting thing that I saw, and I thought, oh, now there's a thought that could help me build better worlds. There's a tool, culture and country being different. So I think it's always good to look at things like this. And we'll look more at it in a minute. Let me just finish catching up on the chat. Vuke Enterprises says, speaking of Plus, I just uploaded a video with a shout out to both. Thanks. Cool. Send me the link. I'll have a look. Thank you. Fuke says, this chart and Plus, but I forgot all the info, so when is Plus? You know what? I forgot it too. Let's go have a look at the place with all the info. Complus.live. That's the web address you need. Why is that not... You better go secure by the time you finish connecting. Oops. Honestly, that does work. Yes, it does work secure. I need to make that forward automatically. So here's the website in its current form. As you can see, we've already raised £631, and you can help raise that by clicking that button just there. I've done a monthly thing, so, you know, I'm not going to do it right now. You can see all the sponsors we've got. We're filling details in on this as we sort them out. So this continually evolves as time goes on. And you can see some of the amazing prizes we've already got for this year's convention. And you can win all of that. And, you know, you can subscribe to our news feed to get an email. We've sent out one email this year. We really, really aren't spammers. So, you know, we will send out more. But, you know, we don't email often. We're currently writing the event management system, or say me, the event management system to book games and stuff. So we're doing a new one for this year to make it better. So that's not live on the site yet. That will be going live in the start of September. That's the plan. So you'll be able to book, also, you know, create RPG events and join RPG events at the start of September. We're doing GM and player sign up will open at the same time. So as a player, if you arrive early, there'll be fewer games, but you'll be able to get first choice. And then as time goes on, more GMs will have more games and so on. And of course, you can take part in the telethon by just watching our stream for 24 hours as we give away all of those wonderful prizes. So when is it? The important question, October the 11th to October the 13th. The telethon will be on the 12th to 13th, midday to midday, UTC, Universal Time Coordinated, whatever. Anyway, if you're in America, that basically means for you, it'll be Saturday morning to Sunday morning. And in the UK, it'll be Saturday midday to Sunday midday. And if you're in Europe, Australia, adjust accordingly. So that's when that'll be. Russell says, the other reason to put it down on paper is if you are going to share DMing. Yeah, I mean, that's something I know a lot of groups don't do, but I know my group does. Actually, both the groups that I'm currently in do share GMing. But it varies how it works. Like for quite often when a new GM comes in, they'll run a new game, possibly even in a new system. But we have done campaigns where we run much shorter modules, like 3-4 session module type adventures, and then we change GM but keep the same characters and world, and we alternate that way so everyone gets to play and GM in the same game and the same world. And then, you know, we just move time on a little bit each time, and that's quite a cool way of playing RPGs if you've got a group with lots of people who are happy to GM. Other groups tend to be, will run a whole campaign that could be 10-12 sessions, and then you get a whole new game. So, but yeah, you know, if you're having multiple GMs in the same world setting, quite often what the next GM will try to do is try to avoid stuff in your settings. They don't want to spoil things you set up. And but you know what? If you document things, they still can. It might just be a character or two to avoid. So, N20 Games said, it's true, we all focus on a project until the idea for another project strikes us. Yeah, get good at finishing. Russell says, everyone can draw and paint, it's just muscle memory and practice. Yeah, and everyone can play a guitar. I have 4 of them, and I'm asked regularly not to play any of them. At least I used to be asked regularly. I now don't play them. You know, it's hard. It's like I've always said, violin, for example, it is one of my favourite instruments that I cannot stand listening to. Because unless you're a grandmaster, violin sounds painful to hear. And I think when you're a creative and you care about the quality of your own work, it can be really hard to draw a map and look at it and go, well, my writing's really good. you know, and not everyone is naturally skilled at both words and images. The two are quite often mutually exclusive. I've worked with a lot of designers over the years, and believe me, not one of them can spell. So, for those of us whose drawing maybe isn't quite as good, tools are the answer. So, hello James, you've changed your icon. You've gone all muscles. Right, hello all. I hope that everyone is doing well today. Blessings. I certainly am doing well, and I intend for it to end better than it began. As Ronnie's saying, joining me in the being hopeless at drawing. Fuke saying hi to Russell. Phil says, I've used GIMP and Inkscape for maps. There are lots of help and advice online and lots of free stuff like brushes. There is. And, if you do want to get into drawing maps, and you'll always have the best maps by self-drawing, so you can be creative in ways tools can't let you be. But, at the end of the day, there are good tools out there that can do cool things. Have a look at those too. So Fuke has Chorio Athato. What? I'm gonna have to Google this term. Come here. I don't understand the way you use words. Is the occurrence of involuntary movements in a combination of chorea, irregular migrating contractions, and athetosis, twisting and writhing. It is caused by many different diseases and agents. Damn, that's harsh. Sounds a bit like multiple sclerosis. Russell says, with enough practice, both are achievable. Rule number 1 is only the artist has to be satisfied. But, here's the thing. It's the 10,000 hour rule, right? How many things do you master? Fuke to Phil, tell me the synopsis of your game on Parageeks 2 channel. Okay, it's going to go into, Lindsay Sterling is my favourite violinist. I've seen her live. In fact, I'm on the DVD of her live in London thing. I'm a small head from behind somewhere. So yeah, no, she's great. I think I'm going to kind of... Oh, right, yeah. So conversation ongoing there, and I think it's going to go into Phil's game. So let's go back and look at the tool. So where had we got to? As we go through the things this can look at. So we've got our cultures up. Let's have a look at the states and see how they overlap. I think I set it up with a lot more states than cultures, didn't I? Now, the way this tool works, I'm hoping we can see where the cultures and states... Yeah, they kind of... It shows through. So you can see this kind of dark line. That's the change of culture. The only thing is, I don't think the cultures and the states, they're not being informed by the geography. There's and particularly not in a fantasy sense or any medieval sense. You've got a state here that's got forest and river in its south and grassland in its north. Surely there'd be... Somebody would carve this out as a territory, this grassland and riverland up here. Why is it bordering to it? That kind of... It's not quite doing that in a manner that I would be happy with. But is this editable? Yes, there is a states tool. So we can go and edit these things, which might have been easier if I didn't create so many. But it's got the brush tool down here at the bottom that I could use to fix that. Now, interestingly, on the states where it talks about, I think it's here we can do it, we can change the culture. There's, not as big a list as I swear I saw earlier. There's all sorts of information here that, millions of people and how much of the map. I assume this is where it is. Let's find the Chumba people. Oh, sorry, the Chumba state. Got to be here somewhere. Oh, I think I saw it in the bottom left. So this is 97,000 people down here. Sorry, 97,000 square miles, 1.7 million people. And yeah, I mean, geographically, it kind of doesn't necessarily follow for me in the way it's formed. If you think about, naval, this potentially, this is not a naval power because those mountain ranges are going to block trade access from the sea to north of the mountain range. So how is this culture trading? It should be, this area over here is more directly connected to the trading opportunities along this coast. So why isn't that spread over both those areas? So I would probably change that. So let's find the whatever empire that is. It's going to be one of these blue ones. Here we go. And then I'm going to draw that. Let's move this out of the way, if it lets me. Oh, not up there. Right, I'm going to draw that to it. Ah! It's gone wrong. I drew the wrong thing. Okay. And we're going to make them, we're going to have them conquer all these lands up here, around here, and then wipe out this country in the middle. They're just gone. They fell. Defeated. And nothing but a historical footnote. That peninsula as well. Obviously they're going to take that. And I think it would be natural for them to expand through this grassland. So there you go. That's what happened there. Tick that off. Let it do its recalculations. And we've just fixed a country. So what's happened? Papa EU is now the biggest... I'm sorting by area, I think. So it's now the biggest area and the biggest population on the map. And that's making a lot more sense. Only it's got a daft name. So let's call it Becky World. So that can't be its capital. Where is it? Capital has to be obviously Becky and Jason. And a limited list of culture options there. I think that's because it's a subculture selection from the main culture's thing. Yeah, so the main culture is which one here? One of these. It'll be the Incan. Ah, and then we had those. That's why I had a limited subculture to choose from. That's really cool. I like that. Okay. So I never even thought of that before either, culture and subculture. I mean, I suppose I've thought of it, but not in those terms. Sorry, I just need to refill my glass because it's broken. Beer. Right, so name base. Oh, right, so yes, name base. Oh, no, you can't see screen. Hang on. There we go. So name base allows us to set names for the various cultures it has configured. There's stuff you can edit. Anyway, don't worry about that. Suffice to say, all the randomly generated stuff can be re-randomed with new data sets, and you can create all of them. So let's have a look at the next thing. So we've fixed Becky World. We've given it some. We've got borders. Let's have a look at the trade routes. I maybe should have had a look at that before deciding on Becky World. Right. So let's zoom in. We have a road connection. So we've got some road trade going on. I was definitely right, I think, to inhibit this empire here because there's no connection. Mind you, there's no naval connection either, other than the coast, which seems to only be going east. This Becky World doesn't seem to have any Coastal trade. We need to fix that. So let's see if we can. Is it editable? Possibly not. We can regenerate routes, which I've just clicked on to regenerate, but it doesn't let us draw them. So it's just doing that mathematically rather than allowing us to edit them within the tool. That's a shame. So I can't fix Becky Wells' naval trade without conquering another country, and I think at that point I'd be getting greedy. So, but so what else can we got? Oh, we get a temperature map. Ah, that's interesting. So, that mountain range, I'm guessing, is quite cold. But Becky World, it's summer all year round by law. Okay, so let's move on to population. Now, when I saw this earlier, it was kind of strange in the way it showed this. Let me turn off some of the other stuff because it's getting a bit slow. Come on, catch up. Catch up. Get rid of the grid. Turn off that. So let's go population. We'll have a look at some of the big cities in Becky World. Keep double clicking it because it's so slow to come on. I think it takes a while to draw it all across the map. That's the problem. So it by the time it actually had drawn it, I clicked it again. Now, is that doing it or not? Do I dare try clicking it? What do I do? Population, right, I've definitely clicked it. Come on, yes. Right, so here's the population. I think we need to turn our town names on for this. So, labels. Come on. I'm guessing this must be the capital. Is that doing the labels or not? Okay, here we go. We have I just turned them off again? Ah, I see. I don't think this is necessarily the population of every town. I think this might be population per the cells that we had earlier, where we had that funny kind of lattice map thing going on. Okay, this is kind of slow at the moment. Okay, right. Okay, so yeah, so the red bar is obviously huge amounts of population, and the blue bars are lesser amounts, but you know, obviously the bigger the bar, the more people. So what I'm going to do is I just want to hit the cells and see if the population markers... No, it's not one per cell, so it must be that it's saying there's a tiny village there or something. Let's see how far... We can't seem to zoom in more than that. So, yeah, that seems to be a limit. So icons, I guess, is... Yeah, that's the city icons. Markers. I'm not sure what markers is doing. We can't seem to draw anything with it. Unsure. Rulers. Alright, there's a ruler so we can measure some distances. So we can say how far is it from there to there. And, oh, I see, it says on the thing here. So, yeah, 1,800 miles, just shy of. Or indeed have the scale bar. So there you go. That's an overview of azgaar.github.io/fantasy map generator. Check it out. See what you think. Maybe it will inspire something. You know, even if it's just a case of you go to the options tab and just hit new map repeatedly. Yeah, go on, generate another new map. And just see what it comes up with. Maybe it will inspire something that you then go and hand draw. It does seem to like doing this thing of putting islands in the middle of two sort of larger collections. Maybe that's because of other settings we've got here with, you know, the number of states and stuff. Let's try doing a super state. I suppose all the rest of it matters. Boom. Just make a new map of one country. Oh look, it's Essos from Game of Thrones. Right. Yeah, it definitely does the kind of 2 continents, one in the middle, but you know, I like that. But we can change it. We can go for let's have one big map. Pangaea. Oh no, I selected Peninsula. I thought I selected Pangaea there. So yeah, really cool little tool. I quite like this. And I think I've accidentally generated my archipelago map. I just cut this big island off. So tell me what you think. See, is it good? So let's go through, let's catch up with chat. So Fuke says, or we could figure out why it seems illogical at first. Right, Becky's doing the whole finger of God thing. This must be when I created my country, yes. I think I would have a great country if I was ruler. We would have, like all the problems we got today, I guarantee you, we would have completely different problems. So Fuke says, first glance, because in our history there are things that have happened that don't make logical sense. True. You know, I mean, nothing is as creative as real history. You know, in terms of some of the strange and weird and wonderful things that have happened. But I don't, you know, I mean, that's one of the reasons why I like to use history as inspiration for a lot of the stuff I do. Right, so Phil says, an unlikely band are thrown together while sharing passage on a ship. This is the... Right, so this is a game running over on Parageeks Channel 2 at the moment that Phil is GMing. And this is a synopsis of that. As soon as they reach port, they are caught up in a fight that isn't really anything to do with them. Without knowing, they help a high-ranking royal. After a second run-in with the bad guys, they get talked into escorting her home. Okay, Phil, you've sold me. I'll watch it. You get to see my naked cat. Phil says they run into some difficulties on the way, and after a big confession, they get drawn in even more. You know, Phil, you've already sold it. You can only unsell it at this point. They've had their fortunes told, which might give clues to the future. Yep, watching it. So that is something you can watch over on Parageeks 2. It airs every Monday night. It starts about 8 o'clock. Ronnie says, it's been a lot of fun to play in so far, Fuke, and my bard will be releasing his album of the adventure soon. So there we go, we've caught up on the chat. Now one of the things we used to do on this is I'd used to say, look, ask me your RPG related questions. And because I'm terribly short on content tonight and not very well prepared and have started drinking, so it's really not the right time for me to be thinking about content, let's do that. Please save me with some content. I was thinking, like, let's go through some of the other steps of world building that I tend to do when creating a map. So when I plonk my cities down on a map, I often, you know, I kind of let the map take me in terms of where I put things. And if I put a second city down, I might go, well, clearly, you know, these two are part of the same kingdom or culture or, you know, empire, whatever, state as the terminology this software used, you know, the same government. But if I'm ever gonna, if that dot on the map or city, whatever I've used to draw that city, if it's ever going to become relevant to the game, the first question I ask myself is, what type of government does it have? Because so often the default in fantasy is a king or a queen, and there's more to history than that, and there are many government types that history never had, and they've they create interesting quirks. For example, I've mentioned this before in videos in the past. I had a city at the start. Originally, that was the elves that ran this city, and they used the form of government called an intelligentsia. Now, that is ruled by the intellectual elite. And when you start thinking about how that could work amongst a bunch of sort of arrogant, self-serving elves that are long-lived, you need occasionally to bring new people into the fold to replace your natural losses, right? So how do people get selected for an intelligentsia? Well, there's an obvious answer, and that's to have a big exam. And that exam could test every possible skill in every possible area of expertise. These elves, they live a long time, right? So they have time to master loads of things. And maybe they're absolutely snobby about this, but what are the things that are important in their society, therefore the things that are in that exam, and they'd kind of feed off each other. Is baking a good cake one of the tests? Well, that's going to impact culture, so cake baking is going to be a thing. Maybe the actual exam varies from year to year, and that creates fads and fashions in the culture. So that whole thinking of what type of government, have a Google for different government types and try something new, because there are dozens upon dozens upon dozens of different forms of government. Now, in the West, we extol the virtues of democracy, which literally translates to demo, the mob, and crassy, rule. Grammatically, rule of the mob. Although some say that a more correct translation is rule over the mob. So, the mob being the people. So, question from Fugue. What's the government of the city of Island? The island, the archipelago city that I was talking about earlier, that I've been building for a long time. That is tied up into the whole world backstory. So, in my particular world's case, the archipelago city, Moraine Archipelago City, it used to be part of what was called the Old Empire. Now, if we go right back into the backstory, the Old Empire was a militaristic imperial empire expanding across the world. And it expanded a long way east and a little way south. To the northwest were a number of... We don't really have a word for this in English. I remember a Portuguese person once asking me what the word for a landmass that was full of roaming tribes and barbarians is called. I said, we don't have a word for that because we're an island nation, but I suppose you could use Scotland. So there's this area to sort of out to the northwest of forests and plains, where a number of orc tribes, as I initially penciled it in, would live. And the Empire realised that, because it had many different cultures in this empire, because it had expanded through so much of the world. But they realised that if they were to conquer all these orc tribes, they were actually going to have to commit an awful lot of manpower, and that's expensive. So is there a cheaper way to conquer that territory? So I thought, well, it's a fantasy world. What would you do to save money? You're gonna use some kind of magic. So they commissioned this wizard called Salan to create a super weapon to kill the orcs within this region, so then they could just resettle it. That was the rough plan. So they launched this weapon and at the orcs, this magical spell that was going to destroy the people of this land, and just give them the land so that they could move in on. But it went disastrously wrong and shattered the world. The world now is has been completely broken up into fragments, and so the map of the world that the adventure takes place on is one fragment of the world. It's not the whole planet. That fragment has been blown into space at the speed of light. So it's actually followed, because it's moving at the speed of light, it's followed by its own explosion. So it's permanently heated up. But the night sky changes every night, making navigation a nightmare. As the stars streak past it, and the sky is lit as it tumbles and the explosion comes into view. The sky is lit in shades of reds and yellows and white, and it's not got a sun on this world, because the fragment has long since left whatever solar system it was in. It's just that the static explosion of its own destruction is the only thing lighting and warming the planet. Now, when that explosion happened, it created a rupture in the fabric of reality that allowed creatures from other dimensions to come in. One of those creatures was a dragon. A dragon had a son and formerly a husband, but the husband did not come through the rift. There's going to be a whole different backstory there about how he died. Anyway, that dragon started laying waste to many of the surviving cities and peoples of the world, until it came across Moraine Archipelago City. And I've written a whole short story about this in a kind of poetic way. But basically, Moraine has a number of gold mines on its western coast. Because it's when I say it's an archipelago, it is of 1,000 islands. It's actually in a gigantic river estuary, over waterfalls, and there's a big tsunami defense wall, because it's fantasy dialed up to 11. And on the western coast there's a mountain range underneath, which is a number of gold mines. So in my fantasy, the dragon, say my fantasy, I don't mean it like that, dragons need gold to survive. Their gold is the food to dragons. That's why they have hoards. It also heals them, so it's like they don't so much eat as they do heal the starvation. So they eat gold to live. And there is this massive gold mine, the largest gold mine this dragon has ever seen. So she's like, okay, I'm not going to kill you. I'm going to be your queen. And as long as the gold keeps coming, I will be your queen. If it stops, you're all dead. And there ain't no one going to argue, because it's a damn dragon, and it's big and it's powerful and more than anyone can handle. So, and she has this son, and that's a whole part of the other part of how this place is run. So she's not interested in the day-to-day of the city. She just wants the gold to keep flowing. So in many ways, she's quite liberal. She doesn't care. She doesn't care if somebody thinks they're better than someone else. They're not. She's the best. You're all equal in her eyes. So in some ways, she's quite liberal. Because you're all just a means for the gold to come out. She doesn't care if some of you aren't gold miners, as long as sufficient gold keeps flowing. So she lets the city kind of do what it wants. She has appointed people to roles to ensure that it keeps happening. And that's what has created the guild, or the house system, as it were. So you've got, the houses that are the political power blocks of the city. Now, to understand them, you have to understand the sun. The sun is essentially addicted to sex, though it doesn't use those words in how I've written it. But he sleeps with everything and anything, and as many of them as he can. And has procreated with many different creatures. And the consequence is any offspring created have blue blood, making them blue-blooded rather than red-blooded. Now, blue bloods can sniff other blue bloods, and it's actually a pleasing aromatic smell to them. And the stronger amount of blue blood, i.e. the closer you are to the sun, the dragon son of the queen, the more pleasing that smell. which has created all sorts of courtship rituals. And so it's created this kind of aristocracy class. Now, imagine a city where that happens, where, okay, the dating pool is limited to those who smell really pleasing to us. But this dragon keeps sleeping with everything. So we keep getting new members of the dating pool, right? I can now marry my son off to that one, and that's a first gen, fantastic. That'll strengthen the family bloodline. But that person, that first gen, is the child of a peasant that just happened to sleep with the prince. So what do you do if you're somebody who's become impregnated by this dragon, this dragon son, dragon prince? Well, and you're poor. Well, you give the baby to the to one of the big houses where blue bloods can prosper, and so it creates some interesting cultural dynamic, I think, that anyone could be blue-blooded. Now, if you've got this kind of two-class system, I thought, wouldn't it be interesting if you had two sets of laws that were just different, depending on whether you're blue-blooded or red? One of the things that's really important in the city, for example, is erosion defences. Because it's an archipelago, there's 1,000 islands, erosion defences are really important. So, it's a fact of law. Anyone tampering with erosion defences can be killed by a city watch. City watch, of course, are privatised in this setting, and it's an appointment that the Queen gives out, every X number of years. Nonetheless, city watch can kill you for tampering with erosion defences. In comes potential police corruption, because anyone they accidentally are too rough with can just be killed and left on erosion defences, all evidence dealt with. It doesn't matter, it's such a serious crime, no one's going to question it. But I thought, what if there's another set of law called the common law that actually only applies to commoners? And what would happen if we put murder as in the common law? So now you've got not only corrupt, privatised police, but you've just made murder only illegal to most of the population. There are some for whom it is completely legal for them to murder. It's just not a law. If they got blue blood, they can kill people because the law has been put into the common law. And I thought, what does that do to a city? Well, it makes the Guild of Assassins a public institution. For a start, they can advertise. Everyone knows where it is. It's on a certain street on an island called Black Market, and everyone knows the door number. And when you got that kind of government going on, you can just see how, as you're writing that, all kinds of interesting twists of culture and courtship rituals and weird laws can just come to you in inspiration because you created a weird government type. So yeah, that's the government of that particular island, of the archipelago, that city. So thank you for asking the question, Fuke. Ronnie says, my fave in terms of rulers as an example is Havelock Vetinari, the patrician of Ankh-Morpork, both ruthless and compassionate, and ultimately wants what is best for the city and its citizens. Yeah, Vetinari, of course, this is a recurring character in the books of Terry Pratchett, and yeah, he's always portrayed as this very politically astute person that's kind of always several steps ahead. I always found him, as I was reading him, a little bit terrifying. I think that's kind of, he's meant to be. He's meant to kind of be a spoiler to the player and stuff. But the player, the hero, the protagonist. And he obviously spars quite a lot with the chief of police. Also, the guy that was the postmaster. I seem to recall he occurs in that one a few times. But yeah, but he's an example of an autocrat, really, isn't he? Although he sort of does and doesn't have the power. it's almost like he exercises his power through pulling strings rather than having absolute authority. And just by pulling strings behind the scenes, he seems to somehow be an autocrat, and yet isn't. I think that's one of the things that makes him quite interesting. Yes, the Scotland joke. Yeah, sorry. So Fuchs says the prince being a dragon makes it seem like that he doesn't care about consent. Yeah, I mean, I think he. It's an interesting one. Like, does it, like, if something can speak and is sentient, I think he might well ask it. I think the issue is that because of his prominence and of who he is, I think that the issue of no doesn't actually come up for him very often. And certainly that's how I've always imagined it. So I didn't really think about consent when I created that character. I could see him taking things too far, I think. If consent wasn't given. But it's not something I'm going to write about. Because I think that's the kind of very triggering topic that I think if a group of players wants to do that, that's their own content and their own concern. And if they all agree to it, fine. But it's not something I think I would put into print. Ronnie says, yes, Veterinary tends to have a good love-hate relationship with Commander Sam Vimes, and also, as you say, Moist von Lipwick of the Post Office. Cracky, you remember all the character names? It's been a long time since I've read any Pratchett, actually. So, this beer is actually a little disappointing. I think I'm caught up on the chat right now, so it could be that this is an early finish tonight. So, yeah, I could sneak out early and fire up a computer game or something. So, unless somebody gets in quick with a chat, and especially if it's one that sends me off down a tangent for a while, we'll probably be ending imminently. So, Vimes... Vimes isn't it? Obviously, his law of shoe economics, I forget the exact wording, is a classic. I don't know if it's my favourite character. I think it's got to be Susan. She's just so dry and stuff. But anyway, enough Pratchett with meanderings. Hopefully next week we return to the normal show rather than me sat here drinking without really knowing what's going on or having a plan. So let's do that. Let's come back next week with the full staff lineup. And I'm looking at this screen. The camera's there. I'm so sorry. Let's come back next week with a full staff lineup, and we'll be hopefully back to our normal form. And I won't have had alcohol or something. I don't know. Maybe I might have. We'll see. Until then, thank you for watching, and goodbye.